Okay. In order for us to finish on time, let's just go over a little bit of an introduction here. And I had a few points to talk about concerning al-Umdat and concerning the Hanbali madhab and al-Umdat and fiqh in general and so on. But I would love first, as I did with Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah, I would love to start by reading the introduction of Imam Ibn Qudamah to his book al-Umdat. Because after all, starting with the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best way to start a class. And also Imam Ibn Qudamah will share with us just a few details. They didn't write, sort of the contemporary professional preface or introduction that we write nowadays that would explain everything about the methodology of the book and so on. Their introductions used to be shorter than this. But let's read the introduction by Imam Ibn Qudamah. That's Abdullah Ibn Ahmad Ibn Muhammad Ibn Qudamah al-Maqdisi. His epithet is Muwaffaq al-Din, and he is Abu Muhammad. Muwaffaq al-Din Abu Muhammad Abdullah Ibn Ahmad Ibn Muhammad Ibn Qudamah al-Maqdisi, in reference to Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem. May Allah liberate it. He said, Alhamdulillah أهل الحمد ومستحقه حمدا يفضل على كل حمد كفضل الله على خلقه وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له شهادة قائم لله بحقه وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله غير مرتاب في صدقه صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه ما جاء سحاب بودقه وما رعد بعد برقه. All forms of thanks and praise be to Allah, the worthiest of thanks and praise, a praise superior to all other types of praise, like the superiority of Allah over all of His creation. I bear witness that nothing deserves to be worshipped or adored except for Allah. He is one without partners. My witness being that of one who recognizes and establishes His right, Allah's right. I bear witness that Muhammad is His slave and messenger without being doubtful about His truthfulness. May Allah bestow blessings on him, his family, and his companions, as long as clouds bring about rain and thunder comes after lightning. Why did they write in prose? Why did they write in sort of poetic form? Why did they have to make their writings rhyme? That was basically their way of entertaining the readership, of making it more interesting, more palatable, more readable. Because when you read things that rhyme, you just become more interested in reading, or the flow of the words, the music of the words would encourage you to read more. Do you see how people like to hear songs, the rhymes? So they made their without compromising the content. And if there was compromise of the content, because at the end of the day, you have to be rational. These are not infallible human beings. If there was compromise of the content, then it was wrong. It was wrong if they had to compromise the content. But basically, to discredit the scholars, like the Orientalists do, they even discredit our historians. They would discredit someone like Ibn Athir because his writings rhyme. And to them, this cannot be serious academic work. This cannot be serious, endeavor at documenting history if you will have to make your historical accounts rhyme. To Orientalists, this is just like they can't take it. They can't. But our scholars used to do this, as a bonus to the readership, we are going to adhere to the authenticity of the content, but we will try to sort of encourage you, incentivize you to read. So we will try to make we'll work on the style of our writings. Okay, then he said, this is a book on jurisprudence, which I have summarized as much as possible. I have limited myself in it to one opinion in order that it becomes a reliable source of information for its readers. Al-Umda means what? The reliable source. That which you can يعتمد عليه, that you can rely on. And some may translate it as the mainstay. That's a good translation also. If you will have to just pick one word to translate it Umda, you could say the mainstay is a good translation. I chose the reliable source, but the mainstay may also be a very valid translation for al-Umda. So he said, I have limited myself in it to one opinion. That's one opinion within the Hanbali madhab. And in the footnotes, in my commentary, I basically included different positions of the different madhab, the three other madhab, and the Zahiri madhab as well, because they have their own unique perspective on fiqh, which is worth including. So I will explain later, inshallah, if I have time, why I chose to add like a flavor of comparative fiqh in the commentary. He said, I have limited myself in it to one opinion in order that it becomes a reliable source of information for its readers, and so that the correct opinion would not be confused because of differences between the opinions narrated by the scholars after Imam Ahmad and those narrated directly by him or from him. Because Imam Ahmad sometimes would have several opinions regarding the same matter, up to 8 different opinions regarding one issue. And you figure it may be hard to think, how could you have 8 different opinions regarding one issue? If you know that the scholars have 20 different opinions about Salat Wusta that were recorded by Ibn Hajar and Fath al-Bari, you will be able to, pardon Ahmad for having 8 opinions sometimes regarding one position. The reason is that he never shied away from recanting his previous position, from saying, no, I was wrong, the correct position seems to be this. And then later, a couple of years later, or a couple of months later, or maybe a week later, he hears something different, and he gets convinced, and he would never shy away or be too embarrassed to say, well, I told you such and such, that was wrong. Here is the new position, my new position. Okay, so some of my brothers asked me, once again, it's just like Shaykh al-Harawi rahimahullah, Ibn Qudamah is doing the same thing. He says, some of my brothers asked me to summarize it to make it more accessible to those who wish to learn and easier to memorize for the knowledge seekers. Easier to memorize for the knowledge seekers. One additional reason why they made them rhyme, so that we could memorize them, or those of us who are capable of that would memorize them. I honestly think that you don't need to memorize those books, at least in our times. Just focus on Quran and Sunnah. And if you memorize the Quran and you memorize a good portion of the Sunnah, you're good, you're great, excellent. But at the end of the day, during their times, scarcity of books, in order for you to buy a manuscript, you had to pay a lot of money because it had to be handwritten for you. So it was, and I'm not saying that memorization is a bad thing, but it was particularly more important in their times to memorize those books. Some of my brothers asked me to summarize it to make it more accessible to those who wish to learn and easier to memorize for the knowledge seekers. Therefore, I answered this request relying on Allah to make my intention sincere and only for His face. In other words, solely seeking to please Him and to help me to attain His great pleasure. He is sufficient for us and the best disposer of affairs. I included in it authentic narrations for their blessings and authority. I chose them from the authentic collections in order to avoid the need to reference them. So he said that whatever I have here is from al-Bukhari and Muslim or one of them, so that I don't need to reference them. I don't need to tell you, yeah, and this is correct, this is authentic, and so on. So that is Ibn Qudamah's introduction to his book al-Umdat. He said that what he did in this work is he basically told you only one position of the Hanbali madhab, and he overlooked all the other positions. He kept them out to simplify things. And he only included a few hadith for their blessings and ayat, for their blessings and for their authority. But this is not this is the type of book that would usually not have any ayat or a hadith. This is the type of the book that is usually called matn, manual. And they took out the ayat and a hadith from those books for summarization, for brevity, and they would leave the ayat and the hadith for the shuruh, the commentaries that will be written, and the hawashi, the footnotes and the side notes that will be added after the commentaries are written. And we will go over this in some more detail, inshallah. Okay, so I have a few points here that I wanted to discuss in the next 15 minutes. Fiqh. This class will be on fiqh, and inshallah we embark on finishing the entire commentary on al-Umdah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to finish it all. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us also from this knowledge, and to make this whole endeavor for me and you one that is intended solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for His good pleasure. This is going to be a class on fiqh, and fiqh means understanding. Fiqh in Arabic means understanding. In the Islamic terminology, it's the understanding of the religion. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fi ad-din." Hadith Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. Muawiyah reported this from the Prophet ﷺ, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fi ad-din." If Allah wants good for someone, He will give him a good understanding of the religion. He will grant him a good understanding of the religion. He will give him fiqh in the deen. The Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the righteous predecessors did not limit fiqh to the practical laws of Sharia. Fiqh to them meant just the general understanding of the deen, whether it is personal conduct, interpersonal dealings, aqidah, tazkiyah, anything, the deen in general. شَرَعَ لَكُم مِّنَ الدِّينِ مَا وَصَّى بِهِ نُوحًا. He prescribed for you in matter of the religion that which He had prescribed for Nuh. So the deen in general, the good understanding of the deen in general was referred to as fiqh by the Prophet ﷺ and the early Muslims. Later on, when things had to be classified, categorized, and sorted out for simplification, the scholars started to use the terminology to give the different terms to different disciplines, and to be more sort of, if I say precise, that would be impolite. What word should I say? What word should I use? They wanted, no, accurate would be impolite. We're talking about comparing them to the Prophet and the companions.
Exacting?
That would be impolite. They want to be more, to break things down for people like us who are a little bit, who need help. Simplify, yeah. So simplify things. So they gave the term fiqh to the practical laws, just the practical laws. So they took out tazkiyah, they took out aqidah. Those two major disciplines are out now, and fiqh pertains now to the law, the practical laws of Islam. So then they defined fiqh as معرفة الأحكام العملية المستنبطة من أدلتها التفصيلية. So it is the recognition of the practical laws as they are deduced from their detailed proofs. From the detailed proofs. Why did they say معرفة الأحكام العملية المستنبطة من أدلتها التفصيلية? Why did they say the recognition of the practical laws as they are deduced, or which are deduced from their detailed proofs? Because the faqih is not the one who memorizes the rulings. It's the one who memorizes the rulings, their proofs, and knows the method of istinbat, deduction. If they said fiqh is معرفة الأحكام العملية, the recognition of the practical laws or practical rulings, then the faqih would be anyone who memorizes al-Umdah. You memorize al-Umdah and that's it, you become a faqih, because you've known all the ahkam al-amaliyah, the practical rulings. But that's not it. I mean, the faqih is the one who knows the practical rulings, knows the detailed proofs. Those are the proofs of the Quran and the Sunnah, and qiyas, and so on and so forth. And knows how we got there from, the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, aqimu as-salah, to saying as-salah wajiba, or salah is mandatory. How did we get from here to there? And this may be a very simple example, and it may say, well, it's obvious how, because Allah commanded us to pray, but it's not always that simple. When we, discuss some of the other rulings, it will not be always that simple to get from there, aqimu salah, to salah is mandatory. So when the Prophet ﷺ said that if you go to the bathroom, take 3 stones with you, for they'll be sufficient. Or man istajmara falyutir, if you clean yourself, do it odd number of times. That's another command, right? Do it an odd number of times. So the 3, 5, 7, if you clean yourself after using the lavatory. But this command does not translate into obligation. It's not like aqimu salah translates into salah is mandatory. So man istajmara falyutir, or if you clean yourself, do it an odd number of times, would not translate into doing it an odd number of times is obligatory. It's not as simple as that. There is more to be considered, but certainly, the default for commands is obligation. But that's why we say the default, because it's not always, it's the default. So that is fiqh. Fiqh, then, it is defined as معرفة الأحكام العملية المستنبطة من أدلتها التفصيلية, or the recognition of the detailed rulings that are deduced from their detailed proofs. The proofs either absolute or relative. The proofs are either indisputable or disputable. What are the 3 indisputable proofs according to Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah? 3 indisputable proofs according to Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah by their consensus. What are they? Quran, Sunnah, Ijma'. That's it. Then the next to this would be very close to this, particularly when clear, will be almost there, is analogy, or analogical reasoning. Qiyas would be almost there. It's almost there. The Zahiris rejected Qiyas, but there is a Qiyas al-Jali, where there is basically the sort of Jali is clear, but I'm trying to find like a better word. Anyway, there is the clear Qiyas, the clear analogy, which is the definitive analogy, which is, it makes perfect sense. The Prophet would have never said otherwise. I mean, if he deemed it as haram, then he must have deemed that haram. That type of qiyas, the Zahiris do not disagree over this. They consider that to be part of the mafhum, part of the implication of the text, even if it is not the mantuq, even if it is not the explicit statement of the text, they consider it to be part of the mafhum. So at the end of the day, they believe in some form of qiyas. So when the qiyas is clear and the logical deduction or reasoning is clear, it becomes almost like the indisputable proofs, Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma'. Now when we say indisputable proofs, Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma', we're talking about concepts. We're not talking about people agreeing on all the details. The Quran, it will be only the difference in understanding, between one scholar and the other scholar. There is no the difference over the transmission. There is no difference over the authority. But when it comes to the Sunnah, then we start to have some differences. But differences not over the concept. Every Sunni scholar, basically maintained the authority of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ over anything else. Even when we say that Malik gave precedence to the ongoing amal or action of the people of Medina, Malik felt that this is more indicative of the Sunnah than the Hadith or the singular reports, Hadith al-Haj. So we have to make that distinction between the Sunnah as the way of the Prophet ﷺ and Hadith, particularly when it comes to the singular reports. Do you think that Malik would give precedence to the action of the people of Medina over the Sunnah? No. He will give it precedence over the singular reports. To him, these were more indicative of the Sunnah than the singular reports, or more telling of the Sunnah than the singular reports. You think Abu Hanifa, radiallahu anhum ajma'in, do you think Abu Hanifa would give precedence to analogical reasoning, his own analogical reasoning, over the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? Absolutely not. He is saying that, qiyas al-asl, which is basically the foundational qiyas, which is, when you say that khamr was forbidden because it's intoxicant, cocaine must be forbidden because it's also intoxicant, that's called qiyas, analogy, right? Qiyas al-asl is not based only on one ruling. Qiyas al-asl to Imam Abu Hanifa and to the Hanafis is based on multitudes of rulings. Basically, رد المثل بالمثل, or compensating for fungibles by fungibles, or non-fungibles, fungibles. Mithli is fungibles. Compensating for the fungibles by fungibles. Fungibles are things that are substitutable, basically. 2 pounds of rice, fungibles. one piece of furniture, particularly during their times. The IKEA's furniture, probably fungibles, because they're substitutable. But like a piece of furniture, that's considered non-fungibles. But 2 pounds of rice. Fungibles are not mithli, because you could always find 2 pounds of rice. So if I leave 2 pounds of rice with you, and you, out of negligence, lose my rice, how do you make me up for my 2 pounds of rice? Buy me 2 pounds of rice. So that is mithli bil mithli. It's compensate the fungibles by fungibles. So Imam Abu Hanifa would say that this concept, I have come up with this concept on the basis of my sort of inductive reading of the entire Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. This is the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. If I have a hadith that would contradict this, I will not take that hadith. Because to me, this concept is more indicative of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Keep in mind that every time I talk about a scholar, I try to defend them to the best of my ability, even though I may not agree. Like, I'm Hanbali. I take the singular report over the Qiyas al-Usul. So I take Hadith al-Musarra. I take, the Hadith where the Prophet ﷺ instructed that when you take when you buy a goat and you find that the other was tied, and then you figure out that you were cheated because the other of the goat was tied to look like it produces so much milk, and then after you milk it for a couple of days, it's not producing that much milk anymore, you can return it, and return with it sa' min tamr. Return with it 1 sa' of dates. We will talk about it. So Imam Abu Hanifa said, no, you took milk, these are fungibles, you return milk. You don't return dates. Fungibles by fungibles. Mithli bin mithli. Well, I'm Hanbali, and the Malikis and Shafi'is also agree on this issue with the Hanbalis. Or I should say Hanbalis agreed with the Shafi'is and Malikis on this issue. But so eventually, it is not my point to prove who's right and who's wrong, but my point is to show you where Imam Abu Hanifa is coming from. When we come to this issue, I will tell you why I believe that the hadith makes sense and that you return it with 1 sa' of tamr, in my belief. But that does not detract from the fact that Imam Abu Hanifa was not trying to defy the Sunnah. It's not conceivable. It's not imaginable. He's trying to say that this Qiyas al-Usuli, I based it on 200 ahadith. I'm not going to leave it now for one singular report. Okay, that's his rationale. So the Sunnah, it's not disputable in this sense, but the disputation is over. The dispute is over the details of Sunnah, singular report, mashhur, mutawatir, what's the position of this versus that, the Sunnah and the Quran, and the interplay between the two when there is a conflict, and the Sunnah make naskh of the Quran make naskh of the Sunnah. Does the Sunnah qualify the absolute of the Quran? To what extent does it specify the general? Things of that nature. They disagree over the details, but they don't disagree over the concept, which is the authority of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Then after those 4, I want you to consider analogy to be one of them, because like I told you, even the Zahiris would accept the clear analogy. So I want you to consider Qiyas to be one of them, but make this thin faint line between the Quran, Sunnah, Ijma' and the Qiyas, and then put like a darker, wider, clearer line after that. And then you will have istishab, presumption of continuity, you will have masalih mursala, consideration of public interest, you will have sadd al-dhara'a, blocking the means, you will have shara' man qablana, the legislations of those before us, and you have multitudes of other sources of proofs that they disagreed over. oftentimes in theory, not in practice, because they ended up agreeing in practice. So blocking the means to evil, they ended up all agreeing to the concept itself, even though they disputed the theory. Consideration of public interest, masalih mursala, they all ended up doing this, pretty much the same thing. Pretty much the same thing, not exactly. But they disputed the theory itself, whether this should be a source of proof or not. And then I would have covered the meaning of fiqh and the definition of the science of fiqh and the proofs. The rest of this talk is addressed in the books of usul al-fiqh, so we will not go back to this discussion. Next time, inshallah, we will start from the divisions of fiqh and the legal values. We'll discuss the legal values. We will discuss the jurist's work in deduction. We will discuss Imam Ahmad's madhab, sources of proofs in Imam Ahmad's madhab, compiling the madhab, some terms in the Hanbali madhab, and then we will talk about the book itself, Umdat al-Fiqh, and my work in the book before we proceed to fiqh al-tahara, or the fiqh of physical and ritual purification. قولوا قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.